Hello, fellow late night lurkers. I'm OldDadGuy. I tell scary stories so you can question every sound in your house at 2 a.m. You're welcome. No turning back now. These next stories are all about Gettysburg. I've been there a couple times, done the haunted tours at night, which is a lot of fun, by the way. I've never had any experiences or anything like that, but when you're there, I feel like you definitely feel like there's something eerie or that there could be something going on there. I think most paranormal investigators consider it to be the most haunted place in the country, probably for good reason. I'm sure I'll do another episode centering around Gettysburg in the future. But anyway, here you go. My name is Tyler, and I don't scare easy. At least that's what I like to tell myself. I've been a battlefield guide at Gettysburg for nearly 15 years. I know every path, every hill, every tragic tale carved into the earth by cannon and musket fire. I've walked those fields in fog so thick you could lose the past and the present all at once. I've heard every ghost story told by tourists, reenactors, and paranormal thrill seekers. Most are just echoes, folklore recycled so often they've lost all substance. But there's one story that still clings to me because it happened to me, and because I still don't understand how I came back. It was early October when it happened. A pale, quiet dusk was settling over the fields like a veil. I'd stayed late giving a special twilight tour to a group of Civil War enthusiasts, a small group from Virginia. Polite folks, respectful of the ground they walked on. We ended the tour at the edge of the wheat field, one of the most savagely fought areas of the battle. I lingered a little after they left, just to soak in the hush. There's a strange kind of reverence in the air at twilight there, like the battlefield knows it's supposed to mourn. I should have left then, but something kept me rooted. There was a light, a faint flicker, maybe 30 yards out into the tall, dry stalks of what used to be wheat. At first, I thought it was another visitor with a lantern, maybe another reenactor straggling behind. I called out, but there was no response. The light didn't move away or grow brighter. It just stayed where it was, pulsing like a heartbeat. I started walking toward it, thinking someone had gotten turned around. But with every step, the temperature dropped. The air grew wet and heavy, like walking into fog. But there wasn't any. The trees around the field blurred at the edges, and sound faded until all I could hear was the brittle crunch of dry grass under my boots. The light flared once, bright gold, and then vanished. When I reached the spot, there was no one there, just a scorched ring of earth. Not burned exactly, just blackened, like something had pulled the life out of it. And then I heard the voices. Not like a group of people talking, more like one voice, multiplied and overlapped. Hundreds of throats speaking the same sentence in different ways, all at once. He carries the light, and the light must not go out. I turned around fast, heart punching in my chest. Nothing, not a soul. But the light was back, behind me now, flickering in the place I'd just come from. It hovered above the wheat again, unmoving, waiting. I should have run. Any sane person would have. But I walked back toward it, pulled by something older than logic. This time, the air changed in a different way. The field around me shimmered like heat rising from the asphalt. And then, I wasn't alone. Men were there. Union, Confederates both, frozen in ghostly echoes of battle. They weren't aware of me. They moved through each other, through trees, through the very soil. They were dying again and again, caught in a loop, as if some piece of time had never stopped bleeding. The Lantern Man walked among them. That's what I call him now. Tall, gaunt, in a tattered Union coat. His face was hidden in shadow, and his hands were wrong. Too long, too many fingers, and he held a lantern that glowed with a dim, sickly light. Wherever he passed, the soldiers froze, turned toward him, and disappeared, like he was collecting them somehow, or maybe extinguishing them. I backed away, but the Lantern Man turned, slowly, deliberately, as if he could sense I didn't belong in his vision. The light flared in his hand, and then I was back at the edge of the wheat field, flat on my back, gasping for air. I never told anyone until now, but sometimes I still see that light out there in the fields at night. Always at the same place, always pulsing like a heartbeat. And when it appears, there's no wind, no birds, just the unbearable silence of something ancient moving through the cracks of time. If you ever go walking in Gettysburg after dark, and you see a lantern glowing where no path should be, don't follow it. Don't speak. And whatever you do, don't let the light go out. My name is Alice Merriman. I've lived in Gettysburg most of my life. Ran a bed and breakfast on Baltimore Street, right near the base of Cemetery Hill. In all my years, I've heard dozens of stories from guests claiming to have seen ghosts or felt cold spots in the night. I've always nodded politely, filed it away, and kept making breakfast in the mornings. But there's one story I never shared until now. It was the summer of 1998, and a woman checked into the guest room on the third floor. She signed the ledger as Miss Elizabeth Carter. No husband with her. She had a soft southern accent and wore a long black dress despite the heat. I assumed she was there to pay respects at the battlefield or to possibly visit the cemetery, as many widows do. She asked very little, spoke even less. That night, around 2 a.m., I was awakened by piano music. I didn't even own a piano. I sat up in bed, confused. It was a mournful tune, slow and deliberate, almost like a hymn. I climbed the stairs quietly, barefoot, careful not to wake the other guests. When I reached the third floor, the door to Miss Carter's room was open. Inside, the bed was perfectly made. She was sitting in the corner, in a rocking chair I'd placed for decoration, her veil pulled back. She was weeping silently, staring at nothing, and across from her was a man, or something that had once been a man. He wore the remnants of a Union officer's coat, shredded and stained. His face was half shadow, half skull. His mouth opened and closed like he was trying to speak, but couldn't. His hand was reaching toward her, trembling. Then the piano started again, though there was no instrument in the room. The woman rose, walked toward him, and the moment she touched his hand, they both vanished. Not like in the movies, not some puff of smoke or burst of light, just gone. Like the air had blinked and they were no longer there. I checked the registry the next morning. Her name wasn't there. No Miss Carter had ever checked in. No payments, no records. But the room smelled faintly of rosewater, and the rocking chair was still swayed. Years later, I was reading about a nurse named Elizabeth Carter who cared for wounded soldiers on Cemetery Hill during the war. One of the men she loved, a young lieutenant, had died in her arms, buried without ceremony. She disappeared from records after 1867. Some said she never stopped waiting for him. I think she still checks in, every now and then. If you ever find yourself walking near Cemetery Hill at night and hear faint piano music drifting on the breeze, stop and listen. You might be overhearing a reunion more than a century overdue. The name's Darren Kelly. I used to work security for the Gettysburg Historical Society. Mostly it meant making sure no one climbed on the cannons or spray painted the monuments. Quiet job, peaceful even, but there was one post I hated more than any other. Seminary Ridge. Not during the day. No, during the graveyard shift. Seminary Ridge is where the first major clash of the battle took place, and you can feel it. The trees don't rustle the same way. The ground feels off, like it's holding its breath. Locals always said the ridge has a guardian. Some call him a spirit. Others think it's just an old legend. I used to think the same. One night in October, around 3:15 a.m., I was making my rounds. A storm was moving in from the west, and the clouds blanketed the moon, casting everything in a thick gray. I was parked near the old seminary building when I saw movement by the tree line. A tall silhouette, standing absolutely still. I thought it was a reenactor trying to scare people. I called out, flashed my light. No response. I started walking toward it. With each step, the air got colder. He didn't move. As I got closer, I saw his uniform. Dark blue. Union. But something was wrong with his face, or lack of one. Where his face should have been was just a shadow. Not like a mask or a hood, just darkness, swallowing all the light. The rest of him was detailed. Buttons, boots, even fraying at the cuffs. But that face, it drank everything. He raised one arm and pointed toward the fields below. Then he vanished. I radioed it in, but no one responded. Just static, dead air. When I turned my back to my truck, it was gone. Just gone. I was standing where it had been, key fob in my pocket, no vehicle in sight, just the wind and that looming darkness along the tree line. Then came the whisper, dozens of them. Not words, just the sound of breath and broken memories. I ran, found my truck half a mile away, parked near the observation tower. No one had moved it. The keys had never left my pocket. A week later, I filed a transfer request. I still do security work, but never in Gettysburg. Some nights, especially when the storms roll in, I dream about that figure, standing watch on the ridge. Not angry, not sad, just waiting. Like he's guarding something that none of us are meant to disturb. If you walk Seminary Ridge after midnight and you see a soldier without a face, do not approach. He's not there for you. He's there for the dead. My name's Maggie Coleman. I grew up outside of Gettysburg, and as a kid, my friends and I would play in the fields near the old stone wall off Emmetsburg Road. The wall was long, low, and crooked, part of the front lines during Pickett's charge. We thought it was just another part of the landscape back then, but one summer night, when I was 13, something happened that none of us ever talked about again. It was late July, a thick, hot night buzzing with cicadas. My friends, Jesse, Lauren, and I snuck out past curfew with flashlights and a pack of Oreos, planning to tell ghost stories by the wall. Kids in town had whispered for years about a girl who walked near the fields there. They say she was barefoot, always humming. Some claimed she was the daughter of a soldier who died during the charge. Others thought she was something else entirely. We didn't believe any of it. Not really. Not until we heard the humming. Soft. Almost too soft to catch at first. A strange, lilting tune that didn't match anything on the radio or any lullaby we knew. Jesse laughed, thinking it was Lauren trying to mess with us. But then we saw her. She was standing at the far end of the wall, barefoot, pale, wearing what looked like a homespun dress. Her head was down, long hair hiding her face, and she rocked slowly, side to side. The humming never stopped. I whispered to the others to stay still. Jesse, being Jesse, called out to her, "Hey, you okay?" She lifted her head. That's when we saw her face. Or didn't. Her eyes were wide. Too wide. Her mouth was moving, but the humming stayed exactly the same. Her lips didn't match the sound. Then she began to walk. Not toward us, but along the wall, dragging her hand across the stones as if tracing something. Everywhere she touched, the rock darkened, moss wilting to black. We ran, full sprint back to Jesse's house. No one looked back. No one spoke. The next day, we went back to see if we'd imagined it. The wall was still there, of course, but where she'd walked, the stone had indeed darkened. Just those few feet. Nothing grew on that stretch anymore, not even weeds. Lauren moved away that next year. Jesse doesn't talk about that night, but I've gone back as an adult during the day. The wall is still crooked, still quiet, and sometimes, when the wind is just right, I hear humming the same sad tune, always near the end of the wall, always waiting. If you're ever near the fields by Emmitsburg Road after sundown and you hear it, don't follow, don't speak, just turn back. Because she's still there, tracing the past with fingers too cold to belong to the living. My name is Carl Edmonds, and for the past 8 years, I've worked maintenance for the Gettysburg National Military Park. I'm not a historian or a storyteller, just a man who fixes fences and replaces bulbs. But there's one duty I never volunteer for: raising the flags on Oak Hill. Most visitors don't even notice the hill unless they take the long route around the Peace Light Memorial. Oak Hill isn't dramatic like Little Round Top or Bloody Angle, but every morning at dawn, we raise the U.S. and regimental flags there, and every evening they come down. That is, except for one day in July when the flags won't fall. It started my first summer on the job, July 1st. I went up at dusk with the ropes and casing, ready to bring down the colors. The sun was bleeding across the treetops, and there was no wind. Everything stood still. Eerily still, really. But the flag was moving. Not fluttering, not whipping in any breeze. It was flowing, purposefully, like it was being carried forward in a march. I thought it might be a trick of the light. Heat distortion, maybe. I reached for the rope and froze. At the base of the hill, down near the monument, were figures, at least 20, marching silently, steadily, in a broken line. Some carried rifles, others held nothing. All of them were just blurry enough to look wrong, like a reflection in water. They weren't reenactors. They didn't speak, didn't react to me, just moved uphill toward the flag. As they approached, the air grew thick. My ears popped. And then one of them turned. His eyes weren't eyes at all, just dark pits. The sockets were empty, yet locked on mine. He raised his hand and pointed at the flag. Then the others did too. Not in salute, in warning. The flag pulled itself taut. The rope jerked from my hand. And I swear, to this day, it would not come down. I tried again the next morning, and the flag dropped easily, like nothing had happened. The next year, same date, same thing. Every July 1st at sunset, those figures return, and the flag refuses to lower. Now, we just leave it be. No one volunteers to be on the hill at dusk anymore. We quietly let it stay until July 2nd. The supervisors know. They don't ask. One time, a new guy, some college kid, decided to test the story. Went up there on the 1st. We found him sitting cross-legged at the base of the pole an hour later, staring into space. He wouldn't speak for days. Said he heard drums in the earth and voice whispering, "Not yet." I've raised flags in windstorms, blizzards, and under blazing sun. But that's still haunted evening on Oak Hill. It's the only time I felt like the flag was watching me. So if you ever find yourself on Oak Hill as July begins and the sun starts to fall, don't try to lower the flag, because something there still hasn't finished marching. I'm Jeremy Novak. I've been running ghost tours in Gettysburg for close to 2 decades now. I've walked every alley, field, and cellar with lantern in hand, telling stories that dance on the line between myth and memory. Some nights are just showmanship, an owl here, a rustle there, and the guests get their thrills. But one foggy night, I stopped telling the stories and became one. It was mid-September, unseasonably warm, but a dense fog had rolled in, thick and low like a curtain draped over the past. I had a group of tourists with me, maybe 15 people, mostly families and a few college kids. We were heading towards East Cemetery Hill, taking the back path behind the old rail bed. The fog swallowed everything past a few yards. Even our lanterns seemed to burn dimmer. I kept my tone light, told the tale of the ghostly rider seen galloping across the ridge. But halfway through it, I noticed we were one short. A woman toward the back, clutching her husband's arm, said her teenage son had wandered ahead. I called out. No answer. The fog just swallowed all the sound. We pushed forward faster. Just before the base of the ridge, we saw him, standing perfectly still at the edge of the trail. But he wasn't alone. A man stood beside him, tall, dressed in what looked like an old frock coat, worn boots, and a campaign hat low over his face. One hand rested on the boy's shoulder. The boy looked dazed, calm even, as if hypnotized. I shouted and ran toward them. The man slowly lifted his head. His eyes were hollow. Not metaphorically, they were gone. Black voids where light should have caught something. And he smiled. It wasn't menacing. It was knowing, like he saw through me, down into the bones of history I didn't understand. He turned and walked straight into the fog, vanishing in 3 steps. The boy, he collapsed right there on the trail. When I got to him, he was breathing, but ice cold. Took 10 minutes for his color to return. When he woke up, he didn't scream or cry, just whispered. He said it wasn't my time. I ended the tour early, walked everyone back. No refunds, no complaints. Later, I looked through old photos of Gettysburg officers and guides. I don't know what I was hoping for, maybe validation, but I found something. A daguerreotype of a battlefield medic named Elijah Thorne, one of the last to leave the field after the fighting. They said he never really left. The man in the photo wore the same coat, same hat, same haunting calm. I haven't walked that trail since, and I don't plan to. But on heavy, foggy nights, I still get calls. Guests swear they see a figure ahead of them, guiding them along. Hand on a shoulder, disappearing just before they reach the hill. If you follow him, don't stray, don't linger. And if he places a hand on your shoulder, pray. He says it's not your time. I'm Thomas Greer, a retired Army medic turned Civil War enthusiast. Every year, I come back to Gettysburg for the reenactments, not just for the history, but to feel closer to something I can't quite explain. Something I saw by Willoughby Run 5 years ago that's haunted me ever since. It was the second day of the event, and I'd wandered off after sunset to clear my head. The crowds had died down, and I followed a narrow footpath along Willoughby Run, just past Herbst Woods. I was alone, no camera crews, no tourists, just the trickle of water and that strange quiet you get after a long day of reenacting ghosts you'll never know. That's when I saw him. Standing midstream in the shallow waters was a man. Not moving, not turning, just standing. His uniform was ragged gray, soaked to the waist, but his body was dry. His arms hung limp at his sides. His head was down, like in prayer or mourning. I called out, thinking maybe it was another reenactor who'd gotten too into character. He didn't respond, didn't even twitch. I stepped closer to the bank. That's when I noticed there were no ripples around him. The water moved around his boots, but not a single splash touched his body. I should have felt fear, but I didn't. Just a deep, pulling sorrow. And then he looked up. His face was young, no more than 17, but worn by something more than time. He had a long gash across one cheek, bloodless, open. And his eyes, they weren't right. Too pale, too wide, too knowing. He pointed at the far bank. I turned, expecting someone else. No one was there. When I turned back, he was gone. The water still ran, and now the surface where he'd stood rippled gently, like something had just moved through it. Back at the camp that night, I asked some of the veterans if anyone else had seen the same strange man. A man named Joe, older, been reenacting for decades, grew pale when I described the spot. He told me there's a story about a Confederate drummer who fled across Willoughby Run during the first day of battle, wounded and alone. He supposedly died in the water, face down, never recovered. Locals claim he returns each year during the reenactments, drawn back to the chaos, still trying to finish his crossing. They call him the Watcher. Ever since then, I've gone back to the same bend in the run. Not every year, but often. I bring a lantern and wait patiently. I've never seen him again, but sometimes the water shifts in odd patterns. And once, I heard the soft tap of a drum echoing off the trees. even though no one else was around. If you walk the run after sundown and you feel like someone is watching you from the water, don't speak, don't say anything, just bow your head, let him pass. I'm Meredith Paulson. I worked as a historical archivist at Gettysburg College for nearly 12 years. The campus is beautiful. Historic buildings, sprawling trees, all laced with the weight of the past. But there's one place on campus I always avoided after dark: the old chapel. The chapel stands alone on the edge of the quad, a mix of stone and shadow with ivy curling like veins around the stained glass windows. During the war, it served as a makeshift hospital, like most places. That much is in the records. But what the records don't mention are the whispers. I first heard them in the winter of 2014. I was cataloging old artifacts late one night. Just me, a desk lamp, and rows of Civil War letters. A snowstorm had rolled in, and the campus was empty. Around midnight, I heard singing, faint, choral, almost angelic. I thought maybe the chapel choir was rehearsing. But when I walked outside, the storm had buried the sidewalks, and there were no lights in the chapel, just the sound circling in the wind. I followed it anyway. The front doors creaked open without effort. Inside, the pews were coated in dust. The air was heavy with cold. The sound had stopped. But then came the whispers. Dozens of voices, murmuring prayers or names, or maybe regrets. I couldn't make out words, but I felt their weight. Sad, desperate, reliving something. I backed toward the door. Then the organ roared to life. A deep, dissonant chord shook the windows. And then silence. I ran. The next day, I asked around. A custodian named Ray, old timer, didn't say much, pulled me aside. "You heard them, didn't you?" he said. I didn't answer. He told me the story. During the second day of battle, wounded soldiers were laid across the pews. A Confederate boy, barely 15, died on the altar, whispering for his mother. Others followed. The chapel became a tomb. The whispers never left. Years later, a student took his own life in the bell tower. Said he couldn't sleep through the voices. His suicide note just said, "They won't stop calling." Since then, I've never stepped foot in that chapel again. But every winter, when the snow blankets the quad and the wind moves just right, I hear them calling, whispering, pleading. If you ever pass the chapel on a snowy night and the organ's playing, don't answer. They don't want salvation. They want company. My name is Russell Kane. I'm a volunteer historian with a penchant for night walks. I've spent countless evenings wandering the fringes of Gettysburg after the tourists have gone, when the ghosts have the town to themselves. I've seen shadows, heard distant bugles, caught glimpses of things I couldn't explain, but nothing ever chilled me like the night I saw the lantern behind the old field hospital. The structure doesn't stand anymore, just foundation stones tucked behind a grove west of town. During the battle, it served as a makeshift operating station. No lights, no proper tools, just screaming men and bone saws. The locals call it the place of mercy, though few have found any mercy there. I'd gone out on a solo walk, late October, around 11 p.m. The moon was high, but clouds kept chasing it, throwing silver shadows across the fields. I followed the narrow deer path that wound behind the hospital ruins, meaning only to catch some stillness. That's when I saw the lantern. It flickered behind the grove, low and amber, like a flame behind stained glass. I figured it was another history buff like me, maybe a photographer capturing the mood. But the light didn't move. It hovered. I stepped closer, calling out. The light flared, then dimmed, then vanished entirely. But I heard footsteps, slow, heavy, behind me. I turned and saw nothing. Not at first. Then I noticed the smell. Iron and rot. The distinct scent of old blood. It coated the air. A man stepped into view between two trees. He wore a surgeon's apron, dark with stains. His sleeves rolled, gloves stiff with age. His face was gaunt, eyes sunken, but aware. He held a lantern, not like the electric kinds we use, but an old oil one, the glass smeared with soot. The light it gave off wasn't natural. It pulsed, dim to bright, in rhythm with something, like a dying heartbeat. He looked at me, and for a moment, I felt him inside my mind. Cold, clinical, not evil, but detached, like a man who had seen too much to care about anything living. Then he spoke. "Still coming," he rasped. I tried to move, but my legs were frozen. The trees blurred behind him. The sky dimmed. Then I saw the shapes. Men crawling, dragging themselves, limping from the shadows toward the ruins, moaning, some headless, some clutching stumps where arms should have been. The surgeon raised his lantern high, and just like that, they vanished. I dropped to my knees, heart pounding. The grove was still. No footsteps, no light, just the cold. When I returned to town, I asked an older guide about the surgeon. She paled. "They say he stayed behind after the battle," she whispered. "Refused to leave. Kept operating, even when there were no more wounded. Some say he's still waiting for more." If you're ever near the ruins west of town and see a lantern flickering where no road leads, don't follow it, because the surgeon only sees one kind of visitor: the dying. My name is Brian Halley. I'm a Civil War artifact dealer who spent most of his adult life chasing relics across the fields of Gettysburg. I've dug up bullets, belt buckles, buttons, you name it, but there's one item I'll never touch again: a length of frayed rope I found buried beneath the roots of an old oak tree north of town. They call it the gallows oak. Locals don't talk about it much, but the older maps showed a solitary tree off the Carlisle Road on a low ridge where deserters were rumored to be hanged during the early days of the war. Official records are murky, but nobody wanted to admit to executions outside of protocol. But the stories lingered. People said the tree grew twisted from the weight of regret. I found it by accident. I was metal detecting after a storm, following a washed out deer trail that cut behind a fieldstone fence. The oak looked dead, but it wasn't. Its branches were bare, even in summer, its bark peeling like scorched skin. Near its base, my detector went crazy. I dug maybe a foot down and hit something coarse. Rope. Old. Molded to the shape of a knot. It should have rotted completely, but it hadn't. The moment I touched it, the wind stopped. Dead still. Then came the creaking. Not the tree groaning in the wind. There was no wind. This was rhythmic, heavy, like a noose swinging back and forth on a branch. Then I heard breathing, slow, wet, right behind me. I turned, but there was no one there. Still, I knew I wasn't alone. I could feel it. The weight of eyes, the pressure of judgment. Then a voice, hoarse and cold. Leave it. I dropped the rope and stumbled back. My flashlight flickered. The shadows around the tree began to shift, stretching long across the ground. And for a split second, I saw them. Figures, dangling from invisible cords, swaying without breeze. Their faces blurred, their mouths open in silent screams. I ran. I didn't even take my equipment. The next day, I returned with a ranger. The rope was gone. So was the signal. But the oak remains, still bare, still twisted, still waiting. Since then, I've heard others talk about it. Hikers who say they felt watched near the ridge. A woman who claimed her dog wouldn't go within 50 feet of the tree. A boy who woke screaming after camping nearby said he dreamed of hanging. If you ever walk the northern woods of Gettysburg and come across a lifeless oak that creaks without wind, don't look up and never, ever dig beneath its roots. Some things were buried for a reason. My name is Hannah Voss. I used to attend Gettysburg College, class of 2009. The years I spent there were some of the best of my life, except for one fall semester when I was assigned a late night work study shift at Glatfelder Hall. The building is iconic: red stone, tall windows, and a bell tower that looms above the rest of the campus like a watchful eye. During the Civil War, the college was used as a hospital. Glatfelder didn't exist yet, but the land it sits on saw more than its share of blood. Most people avoid the tower at night. The bell doesn't ring anymore. Not since the mechanism was disabled years ago. Still, every once in a while, someone reports hearing it toll around 2 a.m. That happened my second week into the shift. I was shelving books for a professor when I heard it. A single toll, deep, measured, the kind that shakes your bones more than your ears. I glanced at the old wall clock, 2:03 a.m. I thought it had to be a prank, some leftover Halloween gag. Then it rang again the next night. Same time. This time, I went to the stairwell. The old wooden steps creaked as I climbed, the air getting colder with every floor. No sound but my own breath. When I reached the door to the tower, it was slightly ajar. That shouldn't have been possible. It was locked with an iron key that only the faculty had. I pushed it open. The tower was empty, dusty, cold, but not silent. From above, I heard soft footsteps. When I looked up the final spiral, I saw someone at the rope. A tall man in a black coat, face hidden by the brim of his hat. He pulled the bell cord slowly, methodically. I called out. No answer. Then he turned. His face wasn't hidden. It wasn't there at all. Just smooth, pale skin, like wax. No eyes, no mouth. But I felt him staring. The bell tolled again, and I was suddenly back on the stairwell landing, heart pounding. The door to the tower shut tight behind me. No one believed me, except the janitor. He told me others had heard it too. Some saw the same man. A few even said they dreamed of him afterward, always standing in the tower, always pulling the rope. Legend says a soldier turned chaplain once rang the bell every night for those who died in the field hospital. When the college grew and the tower was built on that very land, something remained, waiting for a new bell to ring. And now it does. Once a year, or once a life. If you hear the bell toll at 2 a.m., stay in your room, because the man who rings it doesn't care who's watching, only who's next. My name's David Linwood, and I've been leading battlefield hikes around Gettysburg for more than a decade. Out of all the stops, Little Round Top, the Peach Orchard, Cemetery Ridge, there's only one that still gives me pause. The stone steps at Culp's Hill. They seem ordinary. Worn, shallow stairs built into the earth, leading from the tree line up toward the monuments. Tourists walk them every day, but there's one step near the middle, about the fifth up, that people say runs cold no matter the season. At first, I thought it was just an old legend, but I tested it myself. August, 94 degrees, midday sun. I placed a thermal reader on each step, one by one, all normal, until the fifth. It registered nearly 30 degrees colder. That same night, I returned alone. I wanted to see if it was just a fluke. The air was humid and cicadas buzzed in the trees. I climbed the steps again, counting each one aloud. When I reached the fifth, the buzzing stopped. All sound dropped. Then came the breathing. It wasn't mine. It was raspier, struggling, close behind me. I turned around. No one there. And then I saw the shadow. Not cast by anything, but standing in the step itself. Like someone had fallen and never gotten back up. It pulsed, a darker patch in the already dim twilight. I heard a voice, guttural, low, like someone trying to speak through water. Hold the line, a phrase I've read in hundreds of Civil War journals. But hearing it like that, right behind my ear, rooted me in place. Then a sharp pain in my shoulder, like something had pushed me hard. I stumbled back and landed at the base of the stairs. The air snapped back, buzzing, breeze, everything. But my shoulder had a mark, a bruise shaped like fingers. The park rangers didn't dismiss me. One of them admitted there were multiple reports over the years. Tourists feeling faint or panicked at that exact spot. Some said they saw someone slumped on the step before vanishing. A historian I know believes it was where a Union officer fell during the night assault, his men rallying around his final position. The line held, but he didn't. Now, every tour I lead up that hill, I warn them. Step lightly on the fifth, because some ghosts don't roam. They stay, and they remember where they fell. I'm Elise Monroe, and I lead a small group of amateur historians who travel the country visiting Civil War sites. We research local stories, camp near historical landmarks, and document anything unusual. But nothing ever prepared us for what we experienced one autumn night near Spangler Spring. We were camped just beyond the tree line, not far from where Union and Confederate soldiers once crossed paths to fill canteens, sometimes even peacefully. That night, the air was crisp, and the leaves rustled like whispers overhead. We'd finished dinner, and were sitting quietly, taking in the stars. Around midnight, the spring started gurgling louder than usual. At first, we thought it was runoff, or maybe an animal disturbing the water. But the sound shifted. It became rhythmic, repeating. Then came the footsteps, soft, bare, moving around the perimeter of our camp. I called out, thinking it was a ranger or maybe a lost hiker. No answer, just silence. And then a voice, quiet, raspy, and full of sorrow, spoke from the dark. Thirst, so much thirst. I stood, flashlight trembling in my hand. I shined it toward the spring. There were men kneeling there, uniformed, shadowy, dozens. They dipped empty canteens into the water, but nothing filled. They kept trying, over and over. Their hands passed through the streams like smoke. One of them looked up at me. His mouth moved, but the words didn't come out of him. They came from behind me. Don't let it run dry. Then they vanished, We stood in silence for what felt like hours. The water calmed, the air warmed slightly, and the next morning, every one of our canteens, full the night before, was bone dry. No leaks, no explanation. I've read accounts of Spangler Spring being a place of rare mercy during the battle, where soldiers shared water and nods across enemy lines. But I think something lingers there, something left behind by those who died, parched, clutching tin cups they never got to fill. Since then, I return every few years. I leave a fresh canteen near the spring just before dusk. A gesture. If you ever visit Spangler Spring alone and hear water babbling louder than it should, listen carefully, because not every thirst ends with death. I'm Randall Burke. I work maintenance at the Soldiers National Cemetery in Gettysburg for over 20 years. The grounds are sacred, quiet, well kept, and peaceful. But there's one thing I never told the tourists, or the families, or even my coworkers. Someone else watches the gates at night. It started my third year on the job. I pulled the late shift, locking the iron gates just after sunset. As I passed the older stones, I noticed a man standing near the central arch. Black coat, wide-brimmed hat, still as stone. I called out, thinking he was a straggler. He didn't answer. I moved toward him, and he was gone. Just gone. No footfalls, no rustle of clothing, nothing. I chalked it up to shadows and fatigue. But he came back. Every few weeks, always near dusk, always silent, always staring toward the graves like he was waiting for something. Then one night, I stayed later than usual. Around 2 a.m., I heard keys jangling. My keys, but I hadn't moved. I followed the sound to the gates. They were open, and he was standing just beyond them. Closer this time. His coat was old, woolen. His boots muddy. He looked like someone from another century. Still, no face, just darkness under the brim of that hat. And then he spoke. One more yet to come. His voice wasn't a whisper. It was a toll, like a bell ringing low beneath the world. I shut the gates and ran. The next morning, I checked the camera feed. There was nothing. No man, no movement. But my keys were found hanging outside the locked gate. The cemetery historian later told me an old tale about a former undertaker who went mad after the war. He'd buried too many boys, said one soul always lingered, that the count never balanced. He was found dead beside the gates, coat soaked in rain, still holding his lantern. Some say he still watches, waiting for the final name. Now, I never close the gates alone, and I never ever linger by the arch after dark. If you visit the cemetery at night and see a man in black watching from beyond the gate, Don't meet his gaze, because if you do, he may be waiting for you. They call me Isaac. I'm no soldier, no guide, no ghost hunter. I'm just a photographer who's spent too many nights alone on haunted ground. My work has taken me to cemeteries, battlefields, asylums, always chasing atmosphere, always searching for that perfect, spine tingling shot that captures something unseen. But nothing ever compared to what I experienced one humid July evening at Devil's Den in Gettysburg. I had arrived late, hoping to catch the final rays of light casting long shadows across the boulders. Devil's Den has always carried a kind of weight. It's not just the history, it's the air. It hums. The rocks feel like they've been watching longer than anything should. I set up my tripod on a flat ledge overlooking the slope, just above the boulder they call the sharpshooter's nest. As I adjusted my lens, I heard something. A single, distant drum beat. Just one, hollow and soft, like it came from under the earth. I stood still, straining to hear more. Then a second beat, and a third, each one getting louder, closer. I looked around. There was no one. Not a soul. Not a tourist. Not even another shutterbug like me. Just the evening breeze whispering through the brush. And then I saw him. A boy. Maybe 12. Barefoot in a tattered Union drummer's uniform, standing near the split in the rocks. His eyes were dark, not with malice, but sadness, like he'd seen things no child should. And he was holding a snare drum, worn and faded. He didn't move, didn't blink, just stared at me like I wasn't really there. I raised my camera slowly, not daring to breathe. Through the viewfinder, I could still see him, only he wasn't alone anymore. Shapes began forming in the shadows. Soldiers. Dozens of them. Some leaning on rifles, others crawling. Some shouting in frozen expressions of agony. All translucent. All emerging from nothing. And the drum beat began again. This time from the boy's drum. Steady and slow. It echoed through the rocks, and with each beat, the apparitions grew more solid, more real. I lowered the camera. The boy turned toward me, his mouth open like he was about to speak, but the sound that came out was not his voice. It was the rolling thunder of drums, a battle cadence, sharp and thunderous, rattling my chest. Then they began to march, not toward me, but through me, right through the rocks, through the field, toward the ridge. They were re-fighting something, or maybe finishing something. And just as suddenly, silence. The boy was gone. So were the others. But my camera, still mounted on the tripod, snapped on its own. Once, twice. I reviewed the shots right there. The first was of the empty rocks. The second showed the boy, clear as day. His eyes locked onto mine. The third was blank. Not black, blank. White, like the camera had captured too much light, or something it wasn't meant to. That night, back in my hotel room, I heard the drumming again, just once, soft, close. I never returned to Devil's Den, but that photo of the boy, it never fades, no matter the paper, no matter the storage format. It won't decay, like something wants to be remembered, or just never forgotten. Why do dads take an extra pair of socks when they go golfing? In case they get a hole in one. Meh. Oh, dad guy. You thought you were alone, didn't you? But they've been watching the whole time. Like, subscribe, and maybe they'll let you sleep tonight.